Bristol F.2a. The aircraft that was to become one of the immortals of the First War in the Air, the Bristol fighter, had its origins in a design that was intended to compete with the Royal Aircraft Factory RE-8 as a replacement for the BE-2C and 2E. Declining an official contract for 200 RE-8s, the British and Colonial Airplane Company proceeded to design a two-seat reconnaissance airplane that would have a performance comparable with that of the RE-8, but none of the official design's defects. In March 1916, the Bristol R.2a was designed by Frank Barnwell. This was a light two-seater, powered by a 120 horsepower Beardmore engine, with two bay wings of equal span, 40 feet, 8 inches. As soon as details of the new 150 horsepower Hispano-Suiza engine became available, Barnwell designed a further type, the R2B, for the French engine. Although generally similar to the R2A, the new design was smaller and had unequal span wings, upper 49 feet, lower 27 feet 9 inches. Both designs brought the crew close together, the pilot in front with a fixed forward-firing and presumably synchronized Lewis gun on the starboard side, the observer behind with a free Lewis gun on a ring mounting. The significant features of these designs were the placing of the fuselage midway between the main planes, in order to bring the upper wing level with the pilot's eyes, the tapering of the fuselage to a horizontal knife edge at the stern, and the graceful curving outline of the vertical tail surfaces. It was intended to provide a form of emergency dual control for the observer, and there was a device for adjusting the tailplane incidents in flight. When the 190 horsepower Rolls-Royce engine, later to become renowned as the Falcon, became available, Barnwell recognized in it the ideal power unit for his new two-seater, abandoned the R2A and R2 schemes, and designed a completely new aircraft. This was designated F2A, the change of prefix letter signifying shift of emphasis from reconnaissance to fighting as the aircraft's principal function. Two prototypes, A3303 and A3304, were built, the former with a 190 horsepower Rolls-Royce Mark I engine, and the latter with the 150 horsepower Hispano-Suiza. Both embodied main characteristics of the R2A and R2B, but contours and proportions were improved. The downward curve of the top of the fuselage gave the observer an unusually good field of fire for his Lewis gun. The F2A had two bay wings of equal span. On the prototypes, the plan form of the wingtips was similar to that of the BE-2C, and there were end plates at the lower wing roots, possibly because the wing anchorage frame was not covered over to form a lower center section. On both prototypes, the pilot's seat was armored. Work on the construction of the prototypes began in July 1916. A3303 was ready for flight on 9th September. A3304 on the 25th of October. In its original form, the first F2A had two tall side radiators, one for each bank of cylinders, and a pylon-type tail skid. The second prototype had a circular frontal radiator, immediately behind the air screw. The pilot's cockpit had only a small opening, and its tail skid was built into the base of the rudder. On its first flight, A3303 was flown by Captain Hooper, an RFC pilot who did most of the Bristol Company's test flying at that time. It was found that the side radiators on the A3303 interfered with the pilot's view. Consequently, they were replaced by a single frontal radiator. A new engine cowling and revised exhaust manifolds were fitted. At a later stage, the end plates were removed from the lower wing roots. Both prototypes exceeded their estimated performance, and 50 aircraft, numbered A3305 to A3354, were ordered. These production F2As were to have Rolls-Royce engines that were generally similar to the A3303. The wingtips were given a revised plan form, and the engine cowling was improved and simplified. The engines of production F2As drove right-hand air screws. That of A3303 had been left-handed. No armor was provided for the pilot's seat on the production aircraft. The designed armament was a single Vickers gun mounted on the cowling on the aircraft's centerline, and a Lewis gun on a scarf ring mounting on the observer's cockpit. A special tunnel had to be made through the upper petrol tank to accommodate the Vickers gun. With armament installed and a two-blade air screw replacing its original four-blader, A3303 went to the Armament Experimental Unit at Orfordness for further testing. By this time, the shape of the front of the pilot's cockpit had been modified. Pilots with operational experience who flew the F-2As reported enthusiastically on them. In November 1916, Sir Douglas Haig ordered training and equipment of 2 F-2A squadrons in readiness for the 1917 spring offensive. To derive maximum advantage from the surprise effect expected from such a weapon, the aircraft's use was to be restricted until the opening of the Battle of Arras. The first RFC unit to be equipped with the new Bristol two-seaters was No. 48 Squadron, which arrived in France on 8 March 1917. In preparation for the Battle of Arras, which was due to start on 9th April, the air offensive opened along the entire British front 5 days earlier. 6 of No. 48 Squadron's aircraft made their first offensive patrol on 5th April, led by Captain W. Leif Robinson, V.C. Near Douai, they were attacked by 6 Albatros D-3s of Jagdstaffel 11, led by Rittmeister Manfred, Baron von Richthofen. Only 2 Bristol F.2as returned to No. 48 Squadron's aerodrome at Bellevue. This fiasco, which cast doubt on the usefulness of the Bristol two-seaters, occurred because the pilots flew them in what was then orthodox manner for two-seaters, namely as a platform for the observer's gun. And because there was a belief, completely unfounded, that the Bristol F.2a suffered from certain structural weaknesses and could not be thrown about safely. After other early failures, pilots came to realize that the F-2A's main weapon was the Vickers gun, the rear Lewis being largely a means of tail protection. On 30th April 1917, 6 Bristols were able to fight their way back from Douai without loss. A combat technique was then developed from this discovery, and the Bristol, in its F-2B form, went from strength to strength, to win recognition as one of the greatest aircraft of its day. After their withdrawal from frontline service, the surviving F-2As continued to be used for experimental and training purposes. One was used as a test vehicle for several experimental developments of the scarf ring mounting. Various installations of twin Lewis guns were tested, and a bungee-controlled wind balancing gear was fitted to the scarf ring.